Somebody asked a question that's asked very, very frequently, and that is, do I have to forgive? Well, first and foremost, it's important to realize that in the craft, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to ever do anything. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, is how Crowley put it. Do what you will. Now, if the question is, in order to be happy, do you have to forgive? The answer is yes. Yes. Just like in order to get better at playing the violin, do I have to practice? Yes. But you don't have to play the violin. If you want to get good at it, you have to practice. If you want to be happy, you have to forgive. I know a lot of people are always saying things like, no, you don't have to forgive. You don't owe anybody anything. And all of that's true. You don't owe anybody anything. You don't. But you don't forgive for their benefit. That's, I think, where people get really messed up. A lot of times the way that it's couched is, but what they did was so heinous, it was so bad, I don't see how I can ever forgive. And my response to that is, if it was that heinous, I don't see how you can't forgive. And this is what I mean by that. Forgiveness releases you. It releases you from the trauma. It frees you up. You forgive for your benefit. You release out of self-interest. You forgive out of self-interest. I don't know who came up with this saying, but it's a good one, and everybody's heard it, but I'm going to say it again. Not forgiving someone is like drinking poison and hoping that they will die. When somebody does something that's just evil, awful, heinous, we are tied to them, and we are tied to what they did to the extent that we are unwilling to forgive it. If what you want is happiness, if you want release from that, there is no way to get there except through forgiveness. And forgiveness we think of as this big, awful, hard, horrible, painful thing. And that's not true. That's a misunderstanding and a misperception of what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is the exact opposite of all those things. Forgiveness is the release. Forgiveness is the end of pain. Forgiveness is the end of pain. Now, when you forgive someone, you're not condoning the behavior. You're not saying that you're going to be friends with them necessarily. I mean, you can be if you want to be. You don't have to be. But it does say that you're not carrying that with you anymore. You're not holding a resentment for them anymore. That you actually want them to have freedom. You want them to be released from it. Now, if somebody's, I don't know, killed somebody, it's interesting because people oftentimes will say, you know, it was easier for me to find forgiveness for this person who killed my loved one than it was for me to find forgiveness in this other thing that wasn't as big of a deal. There's a limit to that pain where we can't tolerate it anymore. And when we pass a certain threshold, forgiveness is just something that is something that we have to do because we don't want to die. But I think a lot of times we hang on to smaller resentments because that's an amount of pain that we can tolerate. And we don't ever really realize the depths to which we are destructive with our thinking when we hang on to those toxins. How destructive our thoughts can be. How much we are hurting ourselves. So how do you forgive? How do you do it? Well, first and foremost, the first thing is not so much how do I forgive, but am I willing to forgive? It's really only the willingness to forgive that's your responsibility. How to forgive is something that can be taken care of for you if you're willing. But most people aren't willing to let go of a resentment. Somehow we have this idea that we are protecting ourselves from future harm if we hang on to that resentment. Because if we let them off the hook, we are inviting more people to harm us in the future. When in reality, we are more vulnerable to it when we hang on to the resentment than we would be were we to let go of it. Because just from a magical point of view, or even a metaphysical point of view, when you let go of that resentment is no longer in the causative plane for you. Because resentment as a cause, you can see what the effect would be. It wouldn't be something shining and wonderful and peaceful, would it? When you put out, if you plant a seed of resentment, what is the plant? Is it going to be this glorious bush of joy, or is this going to be a lot of thorns, a lot of things that are a lot of poisonous plants that come in and destroy all of your good, all of these weeds? So you have to just, you have to decide, do I want more to resent, or do I want to be freed from resentment? Because if you forgive, you're actually protecting yourself. If you hang on to resentment, you're making yourself more vulnerable. People don't even sit and question that. They don't question their motivation, but they are convinced on some level that hanging on to resentment is protective in nature, and it's actually the opposite. So once you've recognized that all I need is a willingness to forgive, well, then what? If you're willing to forgive, and you really are, then what you can do is you can imagine this person coming into your presence. Imagine this person coming into your presence. And what is your feeling? Do you have are you bristling? Are you upset? Do you have tension? Are you fearful? What is your feeling? Now, if you have all of those kinds of responses, then you know that forgiveness hasn't been done yet. And so you go back and you say, I am willing to forgive this person. I am willing to forgive this person. I'm willing to completely let them off the hook. I know that they will learn their lessons according to their own teacher in their own way, that it's not my responsibility to make sure that they get their lessons taught. The only thing I need is to be released from them. And the only way I can do that is by forgiving them. And then if you still are bristling in your mind when they come into your presence, you can try a couple other things. You can try viewing them as a small child, as a very small child, maybe a toddler who's been very, very naughty, who did something they didn't know any better. That sometimes is helpful. Sometimes you can try seeing something wonderful happening for them. Something wonderful happening for them. And this gets people so upset when I say, well, imagine something wonderful happening for them. And they say, why would something wonderful happen for them if they did something so rotten? And I say, see, you didn't forgive them, did you? Right? Again, you're not forgiving them for their sake, you're forgiving them for your sake. But ultimately, you are forgiving them for their sake, because if you release them, you're releasing them into finding their lessons. If you are resenting them, you are actually, it's like you're carving out a space in the universe where they are imprisoned to you, where they will never be free to go beyond what they did. Now, the bulk, like I said, of our resentments aren't these mortal sins where somebody killed your cat, or they killed your brother, or they destroyed your life completely. Sometimes they are, but usually, interestingly enough, those kinds of things, like I said before, can be easier to forgive because they're so big. It's like, if I don't forgive, I'm going to just die because of the energy. But this other stuff, the other thing that you can do is ask yourself, now, have I always been perfect? Have I never transgressed? Have I never screwed up? Have I never done something that was really selfish, or really stupid, or really careless, or even cruel? Have I never, ever done that? And do I want to be held to that one mistake that I made for the rest of my existence and burn in eternal hell for that? Well, because that's what I want for this person if I'm not willing to forgive them. I'm not willing for them to have another chance. I'm not willing for them to grow beyond this, grow beyond their mistakes. I'm not willing for them to do that. And therefore, I'm not willing for that to be done for me. Because that's how life works, isn't it? you're judged according to the way you judge something, not because there's somebody up in the sky keeping score, but because that's just the way consciousness works. What you put into something is what you get out of it. So if you're putting into this relationship, if you're putting into this this unwillingness for them to ever have a second chance, for them to ever have redemption, for them to ever have forgiveness, then you're telling the universe, this is what I would like for myself, please. Can you please go back through my life and tally up everything that I've ever done wrong and hold me to it and never let me go? That's what you're doing. Do you see why forgiveness is so important for our happiness? It's not just for what they did. It's not just for that relationship with them. It's for us in our entirety, because everything is a hologram of everything else. Everything is what the way that you are interacting with whatever this is, with this person, and your unwillingness to forgive them, is a microcosmic expression of what you are wanting for the entirety of your life. So you may feel like they don't deserve it, but remember that what you're telling the universe is that I don't deserve forgiveness either. I think it might have been in A Course in Miracles. I don't remember. There's a line, I think it was A Course in Miracles, that said, it is the privilege of the forgiven to forgive. It is the privilege of the forgiven to forgive. And it's basically what in the God prayer or the Lord's Prayer is, forgive us our debts as we have forgiven our debtors. It is self-forgiveness to forgive another. And the reason why is because you're telling your deep mind, this is how I want life. I want to be forgiven for all of my transgressions. I want to be let off the hook for all of my mistakes. I want to get free. I want to be freed from all of my past mistakes and learn my lessons in a high way so that I can thrive spiritually. That's what I want. So how do you do that? You demonstrate that to your deep mind by what you do for others. For what you do for others. Now, when you come up with this forgiveness that's really, really difficult, because this thing, for whatever reason, is very important to you, because of whatever reason that you find that it's impossible to forgive, don't look at it as what you think it is, but look at it as an example to the universe of, even this I'm willing to forgive. So no matter how bad I think I was, or no matter how, what I did in the past, I'm even willing to forgive this. So I'm putting myself in a position to be forgiven for even my worst mistakes that I've made, even really, really bad ones that I've made. And that really levels the playing field for you. And that's why you can only forgive yourself. When people say, how do I forgive myself? Or just forgive yourself. You can't. You can't forgive yourself and hold on to resentment for another. It's impossible. You forgive yourself by forgiving another. And then you start to understand that there is no other. The whole idea of the other is the problem. We know this on real, on levels in the physical world. I mean, that's where wickedness emanates from. That's where witch burnings came from. That's where lynchings came from. That's where racism comes from. That's where sexism comes from. That's where all that stuff comes from, is this idea of the other. Right? But the bottom line of the other is not so much even that, but it's in the mind. There is no other. So to the degree that you're unwilling to forgive, quote, another, is the degree to which you are willing and asking to be not forgiven yourself, and the willingness to reinforce this idea of separation. Now, if your family member, if you had a beloved brother or sister that did something, would it be easier to forgive them than this other person? If so, then that's a good way of looking at it. It's just like, I have to look at these people as a brother or sister then, because that's in truth what we are. And it's beyond just being brothers and sisters. It's like we are one. We are one mind. Yes, I have a unique unique personality. Yes, I have a unique soul, an expression, but the mind that I use is the same mind that you use. And so if I'm willing to forgive you, then I'm willing to be forgiven. It's really that simple. And that's when karma really kicks in. When people talk about good karma comes from forgiveness. Good karma is that. That is the causative principle. Karma means cause and effect. The causative principle is in the mind. And to the degree that you're willing to forgive someone, that is the most potent form of karmic release that you can find. So remind yourself, you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for yourself. Now, when you do forgive, be careful of how you forgive. Because most people forgive by saying, yeah, well, you were really bad. And I've come to understand that it's right to forgive. And since you're so bad and I'm so amazing, I'm going to condescend to forgive you. And you're pretty lucky. That's not forgiveness. That's an attack on them. That's an attack on who they are. That is anything but forgiveness. You're not forgiving them because you're better than them. You're forgiving them because you're equal to them and they made an error. Just like you've made. In the scheme of things, in this world, it looks like your errors weren't as bad as theirs. Okay, that's fine. We can do that if you want to. But in reality, everybody's errors are just as bad as everybody else's errors. And because ultimately they're just as meaningless, and you realize that when you forgive them. When you can forgive somebody for one thing, you can forgive anybody for everything. Because in reality, what you're forgiving them for is what they didn't do. You're forgiving them for something they didn't even do. It just seemed like they did it because they were alive in the nightmare with you. Okay, so they in the nightmare, yes, they really happened. I'm not saying it didn't. Yes, in the nightmare, which we all exist in, and it seems real here, it did seem to happen, and we're not negating that. Yes, they really, really hurt you. Yes, they did something really, really bad. It was really, really bad. But ultimately, by forgiving them, I'm catching a glimpse of a greater spiritual vision of truth, which is there's a level at which none of this happened. And that level is that level of the soul, which is where we really do exist. And where we exist, you already love this person and they already love you. And you already have forgiven this person and they've already accepted your forgiveness. And you're one and all is well. So the only thing that you're doing when you forgive on this plane is getting there faster, is getting to the truth faster, is waking up from the nightmare a little bit faster and saving yourself thousands and thousands and thousands of years, possibly reincarnating and having more lives with this person until you finally get it together and forgive them. That's all. So do you have to forgive? No. Only if you want to be happy. And if you want to be happy in this life, then you'll forgive in this life. If you want to put it off to another lifetime, then you'll forgive in another lifetime. Eventually you will, because forgiveness is, like I said, is just the realization that on a certain level, all is already well. All is already forgiven. So you're just saving yourself a lot of time when you forgive. So again, you're not doing it because you're so spiritual. You're not doing it because you're so much more advanced. You're not doing it because you are doing a good thing for them. You're doing it because it's the way that you can wake up to the truth of who you are. It's the way that you can release yourself. Not only release yourself from that, but release yourself from everything else that you might have ways that you have transgressed. That's how you're releasing yourself. And as you release yourself, you come to realize that none of it really happened on another level. None of it really happened the way you think it did. And on another level, all is well. And you get to that level quickly through the process of forgiveness. And that's why we do it. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been wonderful. I appreciate you being here. And until next time, blessed be.